The night was cold and the spaceport never truly slept. Ships came and went, their engines roaring in the dark sky. Merchants shouted even at midnight, trying to sell spare parts and food that smelled half-rotten. But in the narrow alleys behind the main road, silence lived like a shadow. It was in those alleys where forgotten things were thrown away. Broken machines, rusted crates, and sometimes unwanted lives. Rick, a human mechanic, walked home after a long shift. His hands were dirty with grease, his shoulders heavy with tiredness. He knew these alleys well, shortcut paths to his small workshop. Most people avoided them, but Rick did not care. To him, darkness was only darkness, not danger, at least. That was what he thought until that night. He was passing a pile of broken junk when he heard it, a sound so soft that he almost missed it. At first he thought it was a cat, or maybe the wind through the pipes. But then he froze, his heart skipping a beat. The sound came again, weak and trembling. A voice, so small it barely touched the air, whispering one word. Mom. Rick turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. There, between the trash bins and a stack of crates, something shifted. A dirty sack lay on the ground. Tight at the top, it was moving, just a little, like something weak was struggling inside. Rick's chest tightened, his instincts telling him this was wrong. He stepped closer, each footstep heavy. The voice came again, muffled this time. Mom. His hands shook as he untied the sack. The rope was tight, almost cutting into the fabric. When he pulled it open, the stench of fear and dirt hit his nose. Inside, curled up like discarded junk, was a child. Not a human child, but an alien girl. Her skin was pale blue, her tiny arms bruised and bound with rough cord. Her eyes, big and glassy, glowed faintly in the dark. She looked no more than 5 years old, and she was trembling like a leaf in the wind. Rick's breath caught. Someone had stuffed her into this sack and left her to die. The thought made his stomach twist. He crouched and reached out slowly. The girl flinched, pressing herself back against the sack as if waiting for pain. But then she looked at him, really looked, and whispered again, Mom. Rick froze, confused. He wasn't her mother, but in that moment, he didn't correct her. Her voice was so broken, so desperate. He felt something sharp in his chest, a mix of pity and anger. Gently, he lifted her out of the sack. She was light, far too light for a child her age. Her bones felt fragile, her breathing weak, and yet she clung to his shirt with surprising strength. Easy. It's okay, Rick whispered, his voice rough. She buried her face against him, trembling harder. For years, Rick had fixed machines, ships, and engines, but he had never held something so fragile, so alive. He looked around the alley, but it was empty. Whoever had done this was long gone. The city's lights flickered far away, uncaring, only he was here. Standing with this child who had been treated like trash, Rick's thoughts raced. Should he take her to the authorities? No, he knew what they would do. Alien children without parents often ended up in slave markets or medical labs. This girl would be studied, broken apart, or sold to the highest bidder. Rick cursed under his breath, holding her tighter. Her little hand clutched his sleeve as if she knew what he was thinking. Her eyes opened, tired but pleading, glowing faintly with tears. Don't leave me, she whispered. Rick swallowed hard. He wasn't a hero, wasn't a soldier. He was just a mechanic who lived alone with broken machines. But at that moment, none of that mattered. This child had been thrown away, abandoned to die, and he could not walk away. Not tonight, not ever. He wrapped the sack around her small body like a blanket. She shivered, curling into his chest. He stood up and looked at the alley one last time. Dark, silent, and cold, it swallowed secrets whole. But tonight it had failed to hide one. Rick carried her out step by step, her faint voice echoing in his ears. She kept whispering one word over and over. Mom, Mom, Mom. Rick clenched his jaw, his eyes hardening. Whoever had done this would pay, but first he had to keep her safe. He tightened his grip and walked faster toward his workshop. The girl's breath warmed his chest, her glow faintly lighting the night. And though Rick did not know it yet, his life had just changed forever. Rick placed the girl on a soft blanket inside his workshop. It was a small place filled with spare parts, broken tools, and wires dangling like vines, but to her it must have felt like heaven. She blinked slowly, her glowing eyes scanning everything around her. For a moment she didn't speak. She just watched him, silent and still, like a broken doll trying to understand if she was safe. Rick crouched beside her and offered a mug of warm water. Her small hands trembled as she took it. She didn't drink fast. only sipped like she had never tasted anything warm before. He didn't ask questions yet. She looked too scared, too fragile. He just sat near her, letting her feel that he wasn't going to hurt her. After a while, she looked up. Her voice was thin, like wind through a crack in metal. "You're not like them," she said. Rick tilted his head. "Them?" "The ones who tied me," she whispered, hugging the blanket tighter. "They wore black gloves and masks, and they always shouted." He clenched his fists but kept his voice calm. "Do you know their names?" She shook her head, then paused. "They called me number 4. Rick felt his heart drop. Not a name, just a number. He leaned forward. "What's your real name?" She hesitated, afraid to answer, then said, "Sina." It was the first time she said it out loud like it belonged to her. Rick smiled gently. "That's a beautiful name." She looked confused. "You're not angry?" "No, Sina," he said. "Why would I be angry?" She looked down, curling her toes. "They said, talking is bad." Rick was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "They lied." The room fell silent, filled only with the hum of an old power converter in the corner. Rick began cleaning a small cut on her arm. She winced but didn't pull away. It was like she expected pain but was surprised by kindness. When he was done, she whispered something again. Almost too soft to hear. "My mom. She used to hum when she cleaned my cuts, too." Rick froze, then looked at her. "You remember her?" Sina nodded slowly. "She had warm hands like yours." Rick didn't know what to say. The girl had lost everything. Her home, her mother, maybe even her freedom. And yet she sat here remembering the warmth of hands. That's what stayed with her. The feeling of being loved. Not the pain, not the darkness, but the kindness. Later that night, Rick made her a bowl of soup using leftover vegetables and broth packets. It wasn't much, but to Sina it was a feast. She smiled for the first time, her little fingers wrapped around the warm bowl. Rick watched her eat and felt something inside him shift. He'd never been a father, never even thought about kids. But this small alien girl had opened something he didn't know he had when she finished eating. She looked around the workshop and pointed to a broken drone on the shelf. "What's that?" Rick smiled. "That's Buster, used to be my delivery drone before he crashed into a billboard." Sina giggled softly, then covered her mouth quickly, afraid she did something wrong. Rick laughed gently. "It's okay to laugh." Her hands dropped, and for the first time she looked less afraid. But the moment didn't last. Suddenly, the lights in the workshop flickered. Rick stood up quickly, alert. Sina curled up under the blanket, her eyes wide with panic. "What's wrong?" he asked. She whispered, "They're looking for me." Rick's eyes narrowed. "Who?" She didn't answer, just held her breath. Her body began to glow faintly. Soft blue light pulsing from her skin. Rick had seen a lot of things in his life, but this was new. "Sina, are you sick?" She shook her head. "It happens when I'm scared." Rick moved closer. "It's okay. You're safe here." But her light was growing brighter, her heart beat louder, and then she whispered something that chilled him to the bone. "They said I wasn't supposed to speak, or I'd light up and the hunters would come." Rick's blood ran cold. "What hunters?" "The ones who took my mom," she whispered, eyes filled with tears. "They said if I ever talked, they'd find me again." Rick grabbed an old shield generator from under the workbench and slammed it on. Blue energy crackled around the workshop, just in case anyone was watching. He turned back to her, heart pounding. "I won't let them take you," he said, voice low and serious. "You're safe now." Sina looked up at him with the softest expression. She reached out, touching his hand. "Are you really my new mom?" Rick froze, then gave a small smile. "I'm not your mom, Sina," he said gently. "But I'll be whatever you need to stay safe." She blinked, confused for a second, then nodded. From that night on, she never called him Rick again. She called him Dad. And in the quiet workshop hidden beneath the stars, a strange little family was born. Rick couldn't sleep that night, even after Sina curled up on the blanket and fell into a deep, exhausted rest. He sat in his workshop, surrounded by broken machines. Watching the old terminal light flicker, something was wrong. More than just the fact that a little alien girl had been left to die. She wasn't just some abandoned child, she was being hunted. And worse, her mother was gone, maybe even dead. Rick had seen enough horror in his life to know when something didn't make sense. Sina had powers, and powers meant danger, not just to her, but to anyone who tried to protect her. Still, he wasn't backing down. He opened the old archives he kept off-grid, A secret network of broken code, old slave market records, bounty logs, and black market movement charts. Rick used to help smugglers repair escape pods, so he had access to shady data most people never touched. He typed slowly, looking for keywords. Cena, number 4, blue-skinned girl, bioreactive, discarded property. Each word sent shivers down his spine. If someone was tracking her, he needed to know before they found her again. He stared at the screen for hours, eyes burning. Finally, a match blinked on the screen. An old file, half-corrupted, from a shipment manifest 2 months ago. Property Naruzo 4, female hybrid specimen, bioreactive, unstable, to be disposed of upon death of maternal host. Rick's breath caught. Maternal host, he whispered. They didn't even call her mother a person, just a host. His fists tightened, rage burning in his chest. This wasn't just slavery, this was experimentation. Rick leaned back and rubbed his face. Whoever owned Cena and her mother didn't see them as people. They were experiments, something made, used, and thrown away. But then something strange happened. The file updated itself with a blinking tag, flagged missing asset, missing asset. Rick whispered again. They were still looking for her. The terminal flashed red for a moment, an alert from the city grid. Unauthorized search detected. Identity flag pinged, trace initiated. Rick cursed and slammed the power off. He had searched too deep and now they knew someone was looking. He turned to check on Cena, still asleep, glowing faintly in her dreams. She had no idea how close they were, he whispered to himself. We don't have much time. The next morning, Rick wrapped Cena in a loose cloak and brought her into the old scrapyard. He didn't want to leave her alone again. And if someone was watching the terminal, they might track it to the shop. The junkyard was loud, dusty, and filled with the smell of metal and oil, but no one cared what you carried in here. You could walk past 5 guards with a bomb in your backpack and they wouldn't look twice. He led Cena to an old shack near the back where an alien named Jex lived. Jex was a crawler, thin, four-armed, and half-blind, but he had a gift. He could smell secrets from across the system. If anyone knew who the men in red armor were, it was Jex. Rick handed him a battery core as payment. Jex sniffed it, smiled with cracked teeth, then stared at Cena. His eyes narrowed and he hissed, She glows, little human. Do you even know what you're carrying? I'm not carrying anything, Rick said coldly. She's not a thing, Jex raised his hands. Easy, easy, no offense. But you're in danger. He reached under his bench and pulled out an old data crystal. Red armor, dark ships, they came through 2 months ago, he said. Looking for a woman and a child, Rick's blood chilled. They paid good credits to make the city blind. Do you know who they were? Rick asked. Jex leaned in close, whispering, biohunters. Hired by genetic lords, they erased traces of failed experiments. Failed? Rick asked, voice sharp. Jex nodded. If the girl lived and the mother died, it means she inherited something powerful. Rick looked at Cena, who was quietly stacking broken bolts nearby like they were toys. She's just a child, he said. She's a light in the dark, Jex whispered. And they will come to crush it. Rick picked her up and left quickly, heart racing. That night, he reinforced the walls of his workshop, added magnetic shielding and locked the doors with voice print. But it still didn't feel like enough. Cena sat on the floor, hugging her knees. Did you find out about my mom? She asked. Rick crouched next to her. I'm trying, kid, he said softly. She was strong. And she tried to keep you safe. Cena nodded slowly. I remember her voice, like a song. Then she reached out and held his hand. Do you think she would like you? Rick smiled sadly. I hope so. That night, Rick didn't sleep again. His heart was heavy, his mind full. Cena dreamed of a warm place, a soft voice, and someone calling her name, but far away. In the black skies above the planet, a red-armored ship began its descent. It had found a signal, faint but familiar. The hunters were coming. The morning was quiet, too quiet for Rick's comfort. Even the old power converters hummed softer than usual. The air inside the workshop felt heavy, like it was waiting for something. Rick looked out the dusty window at the rising sun, its light barely breaking through the thick clouds of smoke above the scrapyard. But his eyes kept drifting back to the little girl asleep under a worn blanket. Glowing softly in her dreams, Cena had been sleeping longer lately, not because she was tired, but because something inside her was changing. Rick had noticed it, though she didn't speak of it. Her glow was brighter now, sometimes pulsing like a heartbeat. And strange things happened when her emotions ran high. A wrench floating in midair, a flicker of light bending in circles, even a small crack in the metal wall healing itself. At first, Rick thought he was imagining things. But now he was sure Sana wasn't just a child. She was something more, something powerful. Rick stepped toward her and gently shook her shoulder. "Time to wake up, sleepyhead," he whispered. Sana blinked, her eyes glowing blue. Then she sat up, rubbing them slowly. "I had a dream," she said. Rick smiled. "Yeah? What about?" She looked confused. "I was floating and the stars were singing." Rick paused. She always said strange things like that, like memories from another life. He helped her to her feet and brought her a small plate of food. But just as he turned to the workbench, he heard her cry out, "Rick!" He spun around and his eyes widened in shock. Sana had dropped the spoon, and it hovered in the air, spinning slowly without touching anything. Her hands were shaking, her breath coming fast. I didn't mean to, she cried, tears forming in her eyes. The spoon clattered to the ground and her glow vanished in a blink. Rick rushed over and knelt beside her. Hey, it's okay," he said, holding her hands. "I got scared," she whispered. "It just happened." Rick took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "It's not your fault, kid," he said. "You're special, that's not a bad thing." But in his mind, alarms were screaming if anyone saw what she could do. She'd be hunted harder than ever. She wasn't just a missing child, she was a living miracle. Later that day, Rick went to the old bunker under his shop. It was dusty and half forgotten, a leftover shelter from a past war. He spent hours cleaning it, fixing the lights, and repairing the door locks if something went wrong. This would be their last safe place. He returned upstairs and found Sana quietly drawing on the floor. She had sketched a star, a moon, and 2 stick figures, one tall and one small. "Is that me?" Rick asked, pointing to the tall one. Sana nodded. "You're always with me in the dream." Rick sat beside her. Unsure of what to say, he'd fixed machines, built engines, flown broken ships across space, but he had no idea how to raise a child with powers, especially one that the galaxy wanted to erase. That night, while Rick was asleep in his chair, a loud crash woke him. He jumped up, grabbing the old pulse gun from under his bench. "Sana?" he called. No answer. He ran to the back room. And there she was, floating 2 feet above the ground, her hair rising, her eyes shining white. She was surrounded by sparks of light, swirling like stars trapped in a storm. "Stop!" Rick shouted. "You'll hurt yourself!" Sana screamed, not from fear but pain. The lights cracked and flickered, machines sparked, and a glass jar exploded on the shelf. Rick ran through the chaos and wrapped his arms around her, pulling her down. The energy vanished. Her body collapsed into his chest and she began to cry. "I don't know what's wrong with me," she sobbed. Rick held her tight, heart pounding. "You're not wrong," he said, his voice shaking. "You're just more than they could understand." Sana pulled back and wiped her face. "They said my mom had the same light," she whispered. Rick looked into her glowing eyes. "Then maybe that's why they feared her," he said. Sana looked down, her voice shaking. "They said, if I ever let it grow, I would break the world." Rick stood slowly. "Well," he said, "maybe the world needs breaking." He turned and started packing supplies, food, tools, clothes, battery cells. Sana looked up, confused. "Where are we going?" Rick didn't stop moving. "Somewhere they won't find you," he said. "And if they do, I'll make sure they regret it." Sana held her little drawing close to her chest. The one where she and Rick stood under a glowing star. She didn't understand everything. But she knew one thing: as long as he was with her, she didn't have to be afraid. Outside, the sky darkened again, and far above, in orbit, the red-armored ship activated its scanners. A whisper echoed through its comms. "The asset has awakened." The air felt wrong, heavy still, like something terrible was about to fall from the sky. Rick stood at the edge of the scrapyard, staring at the skyline. It had been quiet for too long. No ships landing, no trade calls on the comms. Not even the usual merchant noise, just silence, and the low hum of distant engines above the clouds. Sana stood beside him, wrapped in her cloak. She clutched his hand, her small fingers tight and afraid. "They're here, aren't they?" she whispered. Rick didn't answer. He just nodded. Slowly above them, hidden in the clouds, hovered a ship black as coal. Its hull shimmered with red markings, symbols of the genetic lords. Inside that ship stood a figure tall as a doorframe, his body wrapped in thick red armor. He had no name, only a title, the Collector. He was the one sent to clean up failures, retrieve lost assets, and erase secrets. Cena was one of those secrets, and Rick had just made himself a target. The workshop lights blinked twice. An old alarm system Rick installed years ago triggered silently. He grabbed the emergency pack, slung it over his shoulder, and picked up Cena, underground. "Now," he said firmly. She didn't ask questions. They ran to the bunker entrance behind a stack of crates. Inside, the bunker smelled of dust and old oil. Rick sealed the hatch and activated the shielding. Then he opened the small screen connected to the security cams outside. His heart nearly stopped. They were already here. 6 red-armored soldiers spread through the yard like silent hunters. No words, no sound, just moving with deadly precision. Then he saw him. The Collector stepped through the scrapyard gates like he owned the world. Massive, silent, terrifying. His helmet glowed faintly and his hand held a scanner. It beeped once, soft and slow. "He's looking for you," Rick said, trying to keep his voice calm. Cena shook in the corner, her hands over her ears. "He found me before," she whispered. "He took my mom." Rick clenched his jaw. Not again. Suddenly the lights in the bunker flickered. Something was interfering with the power. Rick tapped the console. Nothing. The screen went black. "Shield's failing," he muttered. Cena looked up, scared. "Are they coming in?" Rick nodded once. "But I'm not letting them take you." He opened the bunker's back hatch, a tunnel that led to the far edge of the scrapyard. "Cena, go," he said. "Crawl through. Follow the blue lights. Don't stop." She hesitated. "But what about you?" "I'll hold them off," he said. "You promised you'd stay with me," she cried, tears running down her face. Rick knelt and wiped her cheeks. "I'm not leaving." "I'm just buying time," he said. "You're my kid now, remember?" She nodded and then hugged him tight. Her glow pulsed around them both like a heartbeat. Then she crawled into the tunnel. Rick sealed it behind her, then turned to face the steel door above. It shuddered once, then again they were breaking in. Rick picked up the old pulse rifle from the wall. It hadn't been used in years, but it still hummed with power. He took a deep breath. This wasn't just about protecting a child anymore. This was war. The ceiling hatch exploded, metal flying in all directions. Red-armored soldiers dropped in like shadows. Rick opened fire. The room lit up with blue flashes as shots echoed off the bunker walls. He hit 2 of them, their armor cracking and shorting out. But more came, faster, meaner. Rick ducked, rolled, and fired again. Pain shot through his arm as a stun round grazed him. But he kept moving, then everything stopped. A massive shadow stepped down into the room, the Collector. He didn't speak, didn't raise a weapon. He just looked at Rick, and then slowly tilted his head. "You are not authorized to contain Prototype 4. A voice boomed from the helmet. Rick raised the gun again, but his hands shook. "She's not a prototype," he growled. "She's a child." The Collector stepped forward. "You do not understand her danger," he said. "She carries the core. She could end stars." Rick smiled through the blood. "She's 5 years old," he said. "She cries when she loses her drawing. She heals when someone's hurt. She was made to be controlled," the Collector said. "She was made to be loved," Rick snapped. And then he pulled the trigger. The shot hit the Collector's chest, but it didn't stop him. Rick braced for the end, but suddenly, the room filled with blinding light. A blast of pure blue energy shook the walls. The soldiers screamed and dropped their weapons. Rick looked up, stunned. Cena stood at the tunnel exit, arms glowing like fire, eyes shining like twin stars. She had come back. She held out her hands, her voice shaking but strong. "Leave my dad alone." And the Collector, who had erased dozens of experiments without blinking, took one step back. The light faded, but the silence stayed. Cena stood at the edge of the bunker tunnel, her tiny arms shaking. Rick had never seen her like this, glowing, fierce, unafraid, and yet her face was pale, her breath short. She had spent something of herself in that blast, something powerful. The Collector stared at her through his helmet. Unmoving, then slowly he lowered his weapon. "She has activated the core," he said, almost whispering. "Impossible. It was not supposed to awaken without the mother." Rick pulled Cena behind him, his rifle still raised. "What do you mean?" he growled. The Collector didn't answer. He tapped the side of his helmet and a faint shimmer of light formed between them. A hologram blinked into view. An image of a woman, blue-skinned like Sena, glowing softly. "That's her," Sena said softly, tears in her eyes. "My mom." The hologram showed the woman strapped to a table, whispering something in a language Rick didn't understand. Then her voice broke through the static, clear, calm and filled with love. "If I die, let her live. Let her choose who she becomes." Rick's heart twisted. The collector looked down. "She was the first," he said, "the only carrier of the original core. She bonded with it, protected it, and passed it on." Sena stared at the image, then whispered, "She gave it to me." "Yes," the collector said. "And now it lives in you." Rick stepped forward. "Angry, and you were going to kill her for it?" The collector didn't deny it. "We were told to control the core," he said. "Not let it roam free. Free means chaos." Rick shook his head. "No," he said. "Free means choice." Sena reached out and touched the hologram of her mother. "I remember her song," she whispered. "She used to sing to me when I was scared." The image flickered, then vanished. Rick turned to her and gently knelt down. "She loved you," he said. "She saved you." Sena looked up, her face glowing with soft light. "She gave me more than the core," she said. "She gave me hope." The collector didn't move for the first time. Rick saw something shift behind that armor. Doubt, maybe even guilt. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he said quietly. "She was meant to be destroyed. The project shut down, the core lost, but now, she is the core." Rick stood tall, his voice calm but full of fire. "She's not your project anymore," he said. "She's my daughter." For a moment, no one spoke. Then the collector reached into his armor and pulled out a small, glowing crystal. It pulsed like a heartbeat, blue and white. "This was her mother's last message," he said. "She hid it inside me. I didn't even know." He placed it on the floor and backed away. The crystal floated, then opened. A voice echoed into the bunker, soft. "Loving and strong to my daughter," it said. "If you are hearing this, then I am gone. But you are alive. And you are stronger than they ever dreamed. You are not made to be used. You were born to be loved. Find the one who will protect you, trust the one who gives without taking. And when the time comes, shine." The message ended, and the crystal faded into dust. Sena was crying now, but not from fear. Rick wiped her tears and held her close. "I think she found the right person," she whispered. Rick smiled through his own tears. "Yeah," he said. "She did." The collector stepped back toward the exit. "I will not report this," he said quietly. "But others will come more dangerous than me." Rick nodded. "Let them." The man in red armor walked into the night without another word. Leaving the bunker quiet but no longer afraid later, Rick patched up the bunker while Sena sat nearby holding a small music box she had found in the rubble. It played a soft tune, strange, alien, but gentle. Her mother's song. Rick watched her, wondering how a girl like that could carry something so powerful. But maybe that was the secret. Power wasn't about size or force, it was about heart. And Sena had the biggest heart he'd ever seen. "Will I always be hunted?" she asked suddenly. Rick looked at her and smiled. "Maybe," he said. "But they'll have to go through me first." Sena smiled, leaned against his side and closed her eyes. She had lost everything, her home, her mother, even her name. But in that quiet moment, with Rick beside her and the music playing softly, she felt something new, something strong. She felt safe, and above them, high in the stars, forces began to move, for the core had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Rick had never seen stars burn so bright. They blinked above the scrapyard sky like silent eyes watching, waiting inside the bunker. Everything was quiet, too quiet. Sena sat on the floor, holding the music box that played her mother's song. But her eyes were distant. Glowing softly, she had changed, and she knew it. She wasn't just a child anymore, she was something the galaxy wanted and feared. Rick finished sealing the last escape tunnel. He had reinforced the walls, added old power cells, and lined the vents with radiation shielding. But even he knew if they really came, this bunker wouldn't be enough. Still, he had to try. Sena looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Will you stay with me if they come again?" Rick didn't answer right away. He walked over, sat beside her, and placed a hand on her back. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "You're my kid now." She smiled weakly, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I miss her," she whispered. "Every time I close my eyes." "I see her face," Rick nodded slowly. "I think she sees you too," he said. "And I think she's proud, but outside, In the blackness of space, a new ship approached, bigger than before, cloaked and silent. Inside were not bounty hunters or soldiers. These were the Eradicators, silent machines programmed by the genetic lords to wipe out all living traces of their failed experiments. And their scanners had just picked up Cena's energy signature. Back in the bunker, Rick felt the vibration before he heard the alarm. A faint tremble in the walls like a distant quake. He stood quickly and looked at the monitor. Blurry static, then shapes in the dust. "They found us," he muttered. Cena stood too, her hands glowing faintly. "I'm ready," she said. Rick looked at her and shook his head. "No, you're not fighting," he said, "but you're surviving," he said. More firmly, "You hide, you stay alive, no matter what." Cena's lip trembled. "I don't want to lose you too." Rick knelt and hugged her tight. "You won't," he said. "I promise." But in his heart, he wasn't sure. The ceiling hatch above the bunker shook, then exploded. Sleek black machines dropped through the smoke, spider-like, their red eyes glowing. Rick fired first, his old rifle flashing blue. The first machine fell in sparks. But two more took its place. Rick shouted, "Run, Cena!" She hesitated, her eyes wide with fear. Then she vanished into the back tunnel. Rick turned, reloaded, and faced the machines. "This is my house," he growled, "and she's my kid." The machines advanced. Firing stun blasts that lit up the room, Rick dodged, rolled, fired again. Metal flew. Sparks burned. He took a hit to the leg but stayed standing. Another machine lunged at him. He swung a wrench and crushed its core, but there were too many. He fell back, breathing hard, cornered now. The largest machine stepped forward, raising a cannon aimed at his chest, and then the air changed. Light poured into the room from behind him, soft at first, then blinding. The machines paused, scanners flickering. A voice rang out, small, young, but powerful. "Don't touch my dad." Cena floated into the room, eyes glowing like stars, her hair lifting, her body wrapped in waves of light. Her mother's energy, the core, fully awakened. She raised her hands and the walls pulsed with her heartbeat. The machines froze, then began to shake. Their red eyes turned blue, then dark. With a single cry, Sana unleashed her light. It wasn't fire or force, it was pure will. A wave of energy burst through the room. Washing over every machine, they collapsed one by one. Lifeless, silent, gone, Rick watched in awe. Struggling to breathe, Cena floated down, her glow fading, her face calm. She looked at him, smiled, and said, "I remembered what she said. Shine when the time comes." Rick limped over and caught her in his arms. "You did more than shine," he whispered. "You saved me." Later, after the smoke cleared and the danger passed, Rick and Cena stood outside under the stars. The scrapyard was quiet again, but everything had changed. Cena looked up at the sky. "Will they keep coming?" Rick nodded. "Maybe," he said. "But they'll never be ready for you." She smiled. And for the first time, her glow stayed warm and steady. She was no longer afraid of it. She had become what her mother hoped for, not a weapon, not a mistake, but a light the darkness couldn't swallow. Rick placed a hand on her shoulder. "No matter what they say," he told her, "you're mine now and I'm yours, and together." Under a sky filled with stars, a human and an alien girl walked back toward a new future. One built not on fear but on something stronger, family.